Welcome to the Doctors of Running podcast roundtable. I'm Andrea Myers here with Megan Flynn. We've got two very special guests with us today, Selene Yeager and Jen Giles. We're so excited to have them here with us to talk about women's nutrition and training needs. So I'd like to introduce Selene and Jen. Selene is a top-selling professional health and fitness author. She's co-authored and written over a dozen books, including Roar with Dr. Stacy Sims. And we're very excited that she's got a new book coming out in May called Next Level. It's about women going through the menopause transition and after, specific topics for them regarding training, nutrition, health. Can't wait to get our hands on that book. Selene is also a USA cycling coach. She's a personal trainer, a pro mountain bike racer. I was fortunate to meet Selene at a gravel bike ride several years ago, and we're so honored to have her join us. I'm going to let Megan introduce Jen now.
All right, so we're also here with Jennifer O'Donnell-Giles, who's a registered dietitian. She's board-certified sports dietitian, speaker, writer, exercise physiologist, triathlon coach, the list goes on. She's also a multiple Ironman finisher. She represented Team USA at the World Championships and is also an adjunct professor at Columbia University. And on top of all of that, she's an author of 3 books on nutrition and a faculty member of the My Sports RD website. Welcome to the podcast, Jen.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
We are going to dive into 4 main topics tonight. The first one is going to be on nutrition. So Jen, this might be your point of expertise for sure. But again, starting with a general question of how much carbs, protein, and fat in a daily diet for an athlete training at a high level. Like, I know for me, reading through a lot of information, it's pretty surprising, specifically on the protein end, how much a female athlete needs when they're training at their peak. So Jen, if you would like to add in any specifics or anything along the lines of the carb, protein, or fat allotment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most of the recommendations really, especially with the athletes that I work with, are individualized. So it's really going to depend on a person's physiology, a person's training load. You know, are they endurance training, or their sprint training, or are they doing some kind of strength training, and what they're actually training for, because it does change throughout the season. So there's some periodization that happens too. So it's not always going to be, like 50, 30, 20 kind of breakdown. It's going to change depending on your activity. But to speak to protein a little bit, I love that you brought that up, because we have realized in the last, 5-7 years that our protein needs, especially as female athletes, are a lot greater than we ever thought they were. So we really need to boost up our protein. And the best way to do that is really to increase protein content at every meal. So it's not just, okay, put an extra scoop of protein powder in your morning smoothie. It's really consistently getting a decent amount, and that's going to vary between the individual, of protein at each meal and snack throughout the day, so that your protein load throughout your day, whenever you're training, whether you're a morning exerciser, evening exerciser, or lunchtime, that your body is getting enough protein before exercise and after exercise for recovery. So its consistency is really the name of the game when it comes to protein. So an increase in the quantity and an increase in the consistent amount that you get throughout. Fat and carbs are, part of the equation too. So, and I really kind of stay away from percentage recommendations, because like I said, it's different for each person, and it's also different depending on, the training season that they're in and the type of workout they're doing that day too. So it's gonna change, but our bodies first reach for carbs, for energy. So we need an ample amount of carbs, and that's just the name of the game. And I think it's gotten a little bit fuzzy over the last couple of years, because people have been taught, through social media and fad diets and all this stuff, that we really, we're afraid of carbs and they're going to make us fat and I can't eat carbs or whatnot. And so we've gotten a little bit off the recommendations. And I think performance actually takes a hit when we decrease our carbs. We need to increase our carbs and increase our protein. So now we're doing a lot, right? And it's really not that complicated. It's actually pretty easy, even though it sounds complicated. But to that note also, we also need to increase our good sources of fats, because I think a lot of female athletes are a little afraid of fats too. So when we're afraid of carbs and we're afraid of fats and we're not getting enough protein, then we're in general under fueling as female athletes because of diet mentality and just not being sure of how to fuel. So if we could balance each meal and snack, or even I call them mini meals, not snacks, throughout your whole day with carbs, protein, and fat, then we're going to adequately fuel our bodies, and then our performance is going to reflect what we're doing from a nutritional standpoint.
Jen,
It's the ultimate goal.
I have a quick follow-up question for Jen. I know so many cyclists and runners who, mostly guys, but some women who will do fasted runs or rides. And personally, that's never worked for me. And I've been doing some reading that fasted training is actually much worse for women than it is for men. Have you read that too? Or could you expand on why it's not as good for women as it might be for men?
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to our physiology. Our actual nutrient needs are higher than men, and it does link back to progesterone and estrogen. We need extra caloric base just to produce our hormones and keep them thriving at the rate that we need them to, no matter what stage of your cycle you're in, whether you're premenopausal, peri, or post. We just need more fuel. So, and I think that's misunderstood because we're always restricting, or we always want to restrict. So we tend not to have the best consequences when we do go into a workout fasted because we're breaking down other parts of our body. We're breaking down muscle mass. We're breaking down skeletal cells sometimes too, just because muscles and bones are connected. So we don't want to break down some amino acids for fuel when we can actually go into a workout with, say, carbs, protein, and fat, which are giving us an ample amount of nutrients to fuel our workouts, and we'll feel much better. I think a lot of women are afraid to eat before working out because they think their stomach is going to get upset, but there's actually ways to tweak the snacks and meals that you're eating before a workout to make sure that doesn't happen. And a lot of that comes down to training. So just like we train to cycle 100 miles, that takes time. It takes a little bit of time in training to train our GI tract to take in food before workout. So it's completely possible if you just take the steps to do that.
Yes. Thanks, Jen.
Sure.
So, all very good information.
Celine, did you have something to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would add we talk a lot about fasted training in on the podcast, my Hit Play Not Pause, and in the book Next Level, because what happens in perimenopause and in menopause is that once those hormones start to decline, it's harder to maintain healthy cortisol levels, your stress hormone. So when you layer fasted training on top of that, it's another stress. And it's, it's inflammatory. It just causes problems. It is much, much more of a problem for women, especially at that point.
Yeah. And wouldn't you say it adds to, you just said inflammation. It adds to inflammation. So it actually creates another barrier for recovery. It's harder to recover if you're already inflamed because of cortisol. And now because you just fasted through a workout, now you have additional inflammation and it's harder to recover from that.
And women perform better in a fueled state. I mean, that's really just like the research just bears that out. It's, we try to help women get around that because there's so much low energy availability among women, and that actually gets worse as they get into menopause and their body composition starts changing despite other things they're doing. So we try to really emphasize, if nothing else, please fuel around your training, right? Get your, if you're even if you're the most carb phobic person, eat them before, during, and after. Like, just at least do that, because there's some really interesting research that's come out recently that if you do that, like if you fuel your training, you're less likely to slip into that state of low energy availability and to have all those cortisol responses and the stress hormones and the inflammation. And conversely, I don't have the paper in front of me, but the same paper found that women who still got mostly the calories and energy they needed, but didn't eat it at the right times. Like if they just back ended their day because they were starving, but didn't fuel their efforts, still could have like sort of a relatively low energy availability because they haven't fueled that effort.
Out of curiosity, as two high-level athletes yourselves, what are some of your go-to pre-workout meals?
I love this.
Yeah.
That
just depends what I'm doing.
Yeah. It definitely depends for sure.
Say you're going out for a brick workout. What would be your go-to morning meal before you head out?
Definitely. I have a couple different things I kind of toggle between, but my favorite really is Greek yogurt with some granola and either usually sliced bananas, and then some kind of berry like blueberries or strawberries. And if I'm in the mood for something sweet, I'll put some honey on that too. But that's really kind of my go-to. And it's quite a large bowl. It's not a small bowl.
Yeah. I'll have like a bowl
if you're going to be out there for...
Yeah. I'll have like a bowl of oatmeal,
ahead,
similar bowl of oatmeal with some yogurt, with some nut butter, with a bunch of and it's the same thing. It's just like gruel. It's just pasty thing, but it holds me over and does the trick. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that too.
Megan and I have talked about this. I think we're both oatmeal with nut butter people too.
Yeah.
100%.
Can't go wrong.
Love it.
Has everything you need, right?
Yep.
So I wanted to go back a little bit to the protein topic. When there are a lot of different protein supplements and powders out there, is there anything specific that females should look for on the label when picking out a protein powder or a protein supplement?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we know that the protein that is the best absorbed, has the highest absorption rate and assimilation rate is whey protein isolate. So we know that. Now, the problem is if you have a vegetarian athlete or a vegan athlete that, or someone who's lactose intolerant and can't tolerate whey, then the next best would be like a vegetable-based protein, like a pea protein, or even say like a pumpkin seed protein powder. So, but the gold standard is whey protein isolate.
Right, and I had, in a little bit of my research, I had looked into leucine on the labels. Do you know if most of the protein powders and supplements out there have that in it, or is that something that female athletes should be looking for a little bit more?
It's funny. I don't know if Selene has any thoughts on this. I think it depends on what protein powder you're looking at, whether they put it in there or not. It's definitely helpful.
You really
and
have to
studies
look.
show that it's, yeah, you have to look, and it's not on a lot. And so the problem with protein powders is a lot of them will have like combinations of whey protein isolate and whey protein concentrate, and then all these vitamins and minerals that you may or may not need, probably don't need, and then all of these other, popular things just to market it, right? And it just depends. So if you want a whey protein isolate powder in and of itself, I like to get a pure one that's just 100% whey protein isolate. And then if you want to add something else, say if you're making a smoothie, then do that, because then you can be guaranteed that the product is high quality and you're not just getting a product with some ingredients that you're not really sure. Maybe it's not third-party tested. Maybe there's not really enough in there to make a difference clinically. So I like to do everything separately. I know that's probably a little bit more work for athletes, but it's going to get the better results. So I always do that. But I'd be interested to see how Selene feels about that.
Yeah, no, leucine. I mean, leucine is one that Stacey Sims talks about all the time. Because of her research, women tend to be more catabolic. Progesterone it makes us more catabolic. Women, again, as you get through that menopausal transition. Again, more catabolic because you've lost estrogen, which is anabolic. So leucine is one of the best ones for shutting down that process. So she is very into leucine, but you really do. I mean, I did a whole story for Bicycling Magazine on it, and I have read many, many, many labels, and you really do have to look. We're at the point now that it's gotten enough publicity, let's say, that some people are putting it on the label more clearly. It has so many grams of leucine and so many grams of, some of those other branch chains, but you do have to look for it. You can't just assume it's in there in any meaningful way. There's a lot of sugar in protein drinks too, and I think that that's important. Like when you're picking your protein powder, read the labels a little bit. Like if it's banana Foster flavor or something or other, it probably has a lot of stuff in it that maybe you don't need daily.
Yeah, the simpler the better, and you can flavor it up yourself, because then you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Selene, do you know if there's a recommendation that either you or Stacey recommend for leucine?
For the amount?
Yeah, for like dosage.
I'm going to say 3 to 5 grams.
Okay.
I would have to look that up to
Just
make
curious.
100% sure that that's correct, but that's the number off the top of my head that she goes with.
Cool.
If I remember correctly from Roy, I think it was a 5 grams.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's hard to find 5. Like if you can find a protein powder with 3 to 5, that's. Yeah.
Yeah. So take homes from that. Look for whey protein isolate for most female athletes, or if you're a vegetarian or vegan, look for a vegetable based protein.
Yeah, pea protein is
switching
popular
gears,
now.
pea protein.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit to more bone health. We wanted to kind of expand on this a little bit more. So a lot of people don't know that women reach their peak bone mass by the time they're 30 in their upper 20s, which, I mean, the first time I heard that, I was surprised. That's pretty young. So are there any nutritional strategies that you would recommend for females to keep in mind as they're either still growing bone mass or still progressing, and even after that 30-year mark?
Yeah, so you're right. But some studies are showing that we actually stop depositing bone at 25. So it's probably on the earlier side of that, which is kind of scary. You're right, because we're still at that age, we're still restricting, we're still, not eating properly, not eating balanced, not thinking about how many servings of dairy we're getting in. And now you have all the fads going on, like, let's not drink milk, let's have, milk alternatives. So then we're decreasing the amount of calcium. So I think it comes down to an education aspect where we really need to educate, especially female athletes, because young female athletes, especially with all the impact that they're experiencing on a daily basis, are actually breaking down bone, which is actually a good thing if you're consuming enough calcium, because then we can build it back up and make it stronger. But if you're not consuming enough calcium, then you're going to be breaking down that bone and weakening your bones. And we only have that window to build our bones. So from a nutritional standpoint, you got to push the calcium, and obviously you have to push magnesium, vitamin K, vitamin D. Those are kind of the biggies when it comes to bone health. And it sounds complicated because I'm throwing out all these vitamins and minerals, but it's really, we can get them very easily if we're intaking dairy. So that's easy. If we're not taking in dairy, there are plenty of vegetable sources of those vitamins and minerals in vegetables too. So if you're doing smoothies with vegetables and either milk, or say you're not doing milk and you're doing a milk alternative, and increasing that amount of vegetables that you're having throughout the day, whether it be in your smoothie or later on during the day, that's how to balance your bone health. But you really, as an athlete, have to be aware of what foods have calcium and then make sure that you're getting it in your diet.
Jen, if an athlete needs to take a calcium supplement, there's so many types of calcium supplements, and they can be combined with magnesium, obviously D. Is there one that is better absorbed than others? Is there one that's better for women at certain ages? What do you recommend to your clients?
A couple of things. I always recommend food first, by the way. So
Yeah.
Our bodies know how to absorb vitamins and minerals through food first. So I always do that. If there is an instance where you need, we find that you have low blood calcium and we need to boost things, or maybe you're traveling for 3 months and you're not going to be getting enough, then I would, which happens with athletes, especially, at the collegiate level, then I would do a supplement. And it matters and it doesn't. There's different kind of calcium supplements. And if you take, say, calcium citrate, for example, has a certain absorption rate. You just need to take that maybe twice a day versus another version of calcium, or you may be able to take once a day. So sometimes it comes down to just, are you able to take one in the morning, or do you have time in your day, and can you remember to take it twice in your day so that there's different absorptions? So again, it's individual, but both will do the trick. But then on top of that, I will repeat again that you really need to make sure that your supplement is from a company that's trustworthy and that's third-party tested, because there are so many bad formulations of supplements out there. So you got to do your homework and make sure it's a good one.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Selene, you have something to add?
I would just drive home the point here about low energy availability. and relative energy deficiency in sport, which is really, really common. If you are not getting your period, that is not okay. Like that, your hormones are a huge driver of bone health. And, you know, when you hit menopause, let's go there again, you can lose up to 20% of, you know, your loss can happen in those first 3 to 5 years. Like you want those bones to be strong. And if you're not getting your period, that hormonal stimulation from estrogen and progesterone, that's really important. It's really important. So yeah, not going into low energy availability. And so you have enough protein and you have enough of those nutrients that Jen talked about is of the utmost importance. And also multi-directional stress is important. A lot of times runners think that running is all you need to do because I do all this high impact, but like strength training and lateral movements and multi-directional stress on your bones is very important, and doing something with your upper body, because a lot of women are not strong in their spine and not strong in their ribs. You know, a lot of places that lose bones. So doing things in your upper body is important too.
Oh, absolutely. And as cyclists, we know the studies on people who only ride for exercise. They've done studies on, I know that this show is about women, but elite male cyclists in their 30s have bone density levels of 80-year-old women. So females, that means if all you're doing is riding your bike and you're 25, 30 years old, 20 years old, you're not stimulating your skeleton enough to build bone mass. You need to be doing plyometrics. I like that, Selene, you hit on multi-directional stress. We know that our bones build in response to the type of stress that we put on them. They actually have stress lines that match the direction of stress they experience. So yeah, thank you for hitting on that point.
I want to say one more thing really quick, because yes, I'm so glad, Selene, that you said the absence of your period is a very big red flag. And when I work with youth athletes, I don't think we can hammer this home more enough, because I think in the world of disordered eating and youth athletics, it's almost like a badge of honor not to get your period sometimes. And I hate to say that, but it's true. A lot of runners I work with are like, you know, I don't get my period. That's awesome. I don't have to worry about it when I'm competing or traveling or away at school or whatever. So I think just making it really clear how dangerous it is and educating these girls, you know, that it's a risk factor, health risk factor that they really need to pay attention to is important. So I'm glad we're opening up that conversation, because I feel like sometimes it's taboo to talk about that. And and a lot of girls hide it, that they don't get their period, and feel good about it because, okay, you know, I didn't get my period. That must mean my body fat's really low. Yay me. And it's just not something to be happy about, hopefully.
Yeah. I feel like, you know, and I think Selene and Stacy have been a big part of bringing this topic more into conversation. But I know when I was running track and cross country in high school 20 years ago, it was, like you said, Jen, like a badge of honor. Like, oh, I don't have my period. That must mean I'm really fit. Like, I'm where I need to be for the season. And I mean, it certainly wasn't something we talked about with our coaches, but we talked about it with each other. But hopefully now more parents are aware. Hopefully even more teenage girls are aware that not getting your period when you're an athlete is a bad thing. It's a sign that you're not getting the energy that you need. And hopefully they'll feel more comfortable talking to their parents about it. Maybe not their coach, but at least their parents, so that maybe they can work with a nutritionist to help get them back on track.
Yeah, for sure.
What all of you ladies have said, so true. There's always that mindset that you talk to young athletes and they see the fact that they're not getting their period as a sign of fitness, that they're ready to compete at their top level, when in actuality they're setting themselves up for a lot of difficulties down the road. And especially going back to the bone density question, you're really setting yourself up for a lot of early bone loss and not reaching that peak bone mass.
We had Amelia Boone as one of our keynote speakers at the summit that I was telling you guys about offline, the Women's Performance Summit. And I mean, she spoke about all the stress fractures she was getting in her femurs. like not just the lower. Yeah, it's it might not even cause you problems down the line if you're getting stress reactions and stress problems and injuries. With your connective tissues, it's causing you problems now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Isn't it like the highest cause of stress factors in runners is low energy availability? Yeah. So that's another thing I don't think that we're quite as aware of. And you get a stress fracture and, oh no, I got a stress fracture. I must have just trained too hard. I must have just ran too many miles. And that's not it at all.
Yeah, and that's that's why you asked about the menstrual cycle to begin with, and I threw me off a little because I wasn't prepared to be like, well, day 1 through 7, but one of the reasons that we wrote ROAR is that because if you know that you're going to be in this follicular phase, right? Like if you get to know your period and like this is how I will feel during this time when my hormones are relatively low, and then I'm going to go into this luteal phase in the second half. And maybe I will have that bloating, and maybe it will be harder for me to regulate my temperature and all that stuff. But you understand and you can work with that to mitigate some of that stuff and just be healthier overall, as opposed to just losing your period and just having all these consequences.
Yeah. And listening to your body. I think a lot of it is just listening to your body. So yes, you might get bloated a little bit, and yes, that's normal and it's okay. So maybe I should drink more water, because that can flush some of that, or that can help me with my temperature regulation, because my temperature, body temperature will be higher, and my blood plasma volume is going to be a little lower. So I need to drink more water because of that.
I need to hydrate beforehand.
Hydrate.
Yeah. Right.
Totally. So it's not so much like, oh, this is awful, I feel terrible, I have PMS. It's more like, okay, this is what's going on. Therefore, this is what I need to do to give my body what it needs and make myself healthier.
Yeah.
And that was my
and also helping
point.
you see.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also helps you see patterns in your training. Like, we've all had workout days where we just feel terrible and you can't figure out why. But if you start thinking about, okay, perhaps one possible reason is I'm in this phase of my cycle, then that makes you feel more in control. It makes you not feel like, oh my gosh, last week I felt amazing and now this week I feel terrible and I have no idea why. The more, knowledge is power, right? The more knowledge we give female athletes, the more power they have over their training and understanding of their bodies.
Yeah,
for sure. And then you can make changes. So if it's supposed to be an interval day and you're not feeling it, it's okay to back off and do that 2 or 3 days from now, and just do an easy workout and just go
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Listen
I'm really glad. Oh, sorry, Megan.
No, go ahead.
I'm really glad you brought up drinking more in plasma volume, Jen, because I want us to move on to our next topic, which is hydration. Because, of course, hydration is just as important as the nutrients we're taking in to fuel our training. So there's so many products on the market, and I've probably tried all of them. And some of them work great, and some of them give you stomach sloshing. Some of them just make you feel like you've got 100 pounds of water in your stomach. So from a nutritional profile standpoint, what should female athletes look for in what they're putting in their bottles? And let's say the type of athlete we're talking about is a runner or a triathlete who's going out for training that's at least an hour long.
Okay, so I think the biggest message here is if you maintain optimal hydration status steadily throughout the whole week, let's say if we're looking at a week training block, then and you're going out for an hour workout, you probably don't need any electrolytes because you're getting them in food and you're maintaining your hydration. So that's first. But let me back up a little bit, because if you are an athlete that's a very heavy sweater, or if it's very hot and humid, which it's going to get here in a couple months, I'm in Connecticut, but wherever it is, if you have to look at your temperature and your humidity. If you exercise at altitude, that's another environmental factor for hydration. So you have to take those into account, on top of the fact of your own sweat rate. So if you're a really heavy sweater, you probably do need to supplement with electrolytes under certain circumstances, so that you can absorb more of the water that you're drinking, and so your muscles can hold on to that water and stay hydrated. So that's kind of the theory behind everything. When it comes to products, this is kind of like a mixed bag because some people, there's so many products, and most, the hydration electrolyte products, started obviously with like sports drinks, Gatorade, Powerade, those kind of things, which were not only electrolytes, and they were marketed as an electrolyte beverage, but they're also really high in simple sugars. And that can come into play. If you're an endurance athlete, you probably need some simple sugars as long as your GI tract can handle it. And as long, if you're taking it in at a certain interval of time. Some people do not do well with taking in simple sugars in a liquid format. They need solid food and just electrolytes on the side. So again, it's going to depend on what you can tolerate. My biggest recommendation and what I recommend the most is start with an electrolyte supplement that doesn't have excess sugar. And then take your carbohydrates and your proteins and maybe your fat, if you're taking in fat during a ride, separately with whole food or maybe sports bars or something like that. So electrolyte supplements that don't have sugar, things like Noon, Zim, Camelback makes one, You Can Hydrate makes one, Base Performance Salt makes one, Salt Sticks. I mean, there's a million, right? There's so many, but those are ones without sugar. Then the other ones, like the sports drinks, so say like Scratch, Hammer, what are some other ones? I can't even think of them off. Some, you guys use any that you can remember?
Cliff, Vitamax.
Vitamax, Accelerate, all those ones that have simple sugars in them as needed based on, what workout you're doing, what training cycle you're in, how long you're going out for, if you've eaten a decent amount of carbs and protein before your workout. There's all these different factors. But like I said, you also need to know what your sweat rate is before you ever go down that road so that you know how much fluids you need and how many electrolytes you need along with that fluid.
Mm-hmm. Selene, in Roar, I hope I'm coming through here. In Roar, you and Stacy wrote about the importance of looking at the osmolality of certain sports beverages, and that you don't want to drink something that has higher osmolality than blood. And let's see, blood is 275 to 295 milliosmoles. So, like, which out of the popular beverages out there, like some that we just named, are some better than others in terms of being less concentrated than our blood? And why does that even matter?
Yeah, I mean, she tends to recommend a lower, like a lower carb, like some carb, because some of that salt and sugar helps assist with the hydration process. But there are some very dense liquid nutrition products, right, that promise to give you your carbohydrates along with your hydration. And that it just doesn't, some people can get away with it. Some people can do, they can train themselves. But they're, I think about, there's some of the infinite products. There's just some products there's like 300 calories a bottle, right? And there's a lot of people playing with different formulations of carbohydrates. You have the Mortons of the world doing a hydrocell. You have different people using different kinds of starches to sort of trick the system, and sometimes people have success with that and sometimes they don't. But to answer your broader question, is that what the trouble you can run into with those very dense drinks is that you're going to be pulling blood or pulling water into your gut to dilute them so you can get them out. Like, it's just basic osmolality is what you're drawing from. If it's too concentrated here, it's not going to just go across the membranes, right? You're going to have to draw water in to dilute it to get it into your system. And if you draw water into your gut, bad things happen. Like, right.
Yes, very bad things.
Bad things happen.
So, I'm also glad you mentioned Morton. Megan and I are both big Morton fans. And, I was reading about how Morton claims to work. They say that, because the drink becomes a hydrogel in your gut, it encapsulates the sugar. So even though it's more concentrated, it's still able to cross over into your bloodstream in your small intestine. And I was looking to see if Stacy had written anything about Morton, and I found one thing. It was a post on, I think, your podcast page, But she said that the real issue is fructose, and that particularly postmenopausal women do not do well with digesting fructose. So she said, definitely for postmenopausal women, Morton probably isn't the best choice. Premenopausal, if it works for you, fine. Do you have any experience with like any of your listeners or friends with Morton?
Yeah, I've tested it myself, and I do have some people in. I can't rely on it for a full day. Like I can't do a 140-mile gravel race on just Morton. That will not go well for me. That said, I can't do it with any liquid carbohydrate sources. You know, Morton is one of the ones that I do find most tolerable, but I have to mix it with something else. Within the day. Like I can't just have bottle after bottle of Morton. And I do think that I have become less tolerant of some of that stuff, with age, and the menopause transition. But there's some people who are in my community who do well with it. You know, we're not test tubes. Like you don't pull the same thing in each person and the same results happen. So I think it's always okay to try it. But, fructose is definitely a thing, which doesn't mean you can't eat fruit. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I shouldn't eat fruit. It's like, no, the fiber is just like the concentrated, amount of fructose that is in a lot of things. I have a little question I wanted to ask Jen when she was talking, though, about the electrolytes, if I can quickly. I have a huge problem with stevia, which is in everything now. Like, it upsets my belly. I can't stand the taste. And it seems to be in everything because when they take out the sugar, they put in stevia.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So if it upsets your stomach, I would do something more pure, like a base performance salt.
Okay.
Or even like a salt stick capsule. You're getting a lot more sodium at one time, so you have to go into it a little bit more hydrated. Drink water before, then take it, and after. The good thing about like the tablets is you're sipping. So say a noon tablet is like 300 milligrams of sodium and I think 40 or 60 milligrams of potassium, but you're sipping that over time because it's diluted in a 24-ounce water bottle, right?
Right.
If you take a base salt, like a serving of base salt, it's 300 in one serving. So you're getting it right away, which is a lot, which means you have to be hydrated going into it. And then you have to maintain your hydration afterwards. So it's just tricky. The logistics, a little bit trickier, but it's not complicated. It's pretty easy.
Gotcha.
So that's what I would recommend for you because then you don't have any sweeteners at all. It tastes like salt. So you have to like the taste of salt. But that's good.
I do.
It makes you thirsty.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Way better than stevia. Didn't mean to hijack your question there. And sorry, just like...
No. That's a great question.
I'm glad you brought up stevia, actually. So I've read that stevia and some other artificial sweeteners, and I mean, I know some people say stevia is a natural sweetener, but most products that have stevia in it don't have pure stevia. It's a processed form of stevia. But the artificial sweeteners disrupt your gut microbiome. Are either of you aware of any research about
We had a woman on the Performance, Stacey Kazanchuk, that's her specialty is the gut microbiome. And, it as with anything, it's the amount that you use because your gut microbiome, from what she explains, it responds to what you're putting into it, right? So, and it's also very vulnerable during exercise. So I think that's the interesting part of that is that that's why a lot of these drinks are trying to get away from anything like artificial colors or all those things because they can aggravate the system. But I don't know, Jen, do you know more about the microbiome? And
I think the research right now is still a little bit mixed. I think that there's some sweeteners that we know can disrupt your microbiome, like sucralose and obviously aspartame. Like those ones we know. So we really need to steer clear of those as athletes. Stevia is still actually on the safe list. But some people, just like Selene said, it upsets her GI tract. Yeah,
it really upsets my belly.
It does me too. I don't tolerate that very well either. So you have to kind of see and, trial and error, see if it's okay with you. I think the more we learn about stevia, in the years to come, we'll have a better answer for that. Because really the research right now is so mixed. Some say it does.
And it could even be genetic, right? Like so many of these things are in your phenotype. Like you don't even... Like, why do some people have like cilantro taste like soap? I mean, a lot of these things are just sort of like in our DNA too. So
for sure. And I know monk fruit is one that's coming up more and more recently.
Which is?
monk fruit sweetener.
Oh yeah.
So I think we're gonna be seeing that more in the sports product world. So that's another one we're gonna have to start studying more to get some more research on that.
Right. And it's one thing to have stevia in a product that also has calories, like has carbohydrates, but it's a whole nother thing to have any artificial sweetener in a product that doesn't have calories, because of course we know that that causes your insulin levels to spike. Your body tastes sweet and it thinks you ingested sugar, but you didn't. So any of those like low calorie electrolyte mixes, those are really not good for athletes in particular to use, right?
Yes and no. And again, it depends if you ate something beforehand. So if you're eating a pre-workout snack and then you're having one, there's your energy. That's going to help absorb that and block that. But if you're eating on an empty stomach, that's going to be a problem, most likely.
Yeah.
Depending on if it's a problem for you.
Sure. Yeah. One more question about hydration, and then we're going to move on to another topic. But what is the deal with pre-hydration products, like the really high sodium drinks? Yeah, and I love them. I love Osmo Preload.
I'm a big fan.
But for listeners who maybe don't know what pre-hydration is, could you both explain how it works and why someone might want to use it?
Since I'm a fan, I'll just talk about why I'm a fan, and then
go for it.
This is where I learned. Like when I was writing Roar with Stacy, I went out and spent time doing hill repeats and peeing on urinalysis sticks and doing all kinds of stuff with her. But when you talk about the menstrual cycle, particularly in that luteal phase where you hit some of the high hormones and the blood plasma is shifting, your blood plasma can shift by 8%. And it can just make it really hard for you to thermoregulate. And I was running into that a lot, especially summertime, hot mountain bike stage races and that kind of thing. And I found that those preload products were a godsend for me. I would drink them ice cold before an event, and it just helped me manage my temperature, be able to sweat. They are as they sound. They just raise your blood volume because they're so high in sodium.
Yeah, I've actually never tried them, but I think it's the next kind of phase of sodium loading, which is what we used to do, 10, 15 years ago, which is still very, very effective, because when you're raising your blood sodium level, you're going to actually increase the absorption of water into your muscles and maintain hydration, which is extremely important, just like you said, Selene, in certain phases of your cycle. So, but I think it's important actually at all phases of your cycle, especially if you're someone who's a heavy sweater or has a hard time in hot and humid environments. So, yes, I'm interested.
Before a really hot race.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Hot and humid races.
Oh, yeah. The preload products are a godsend before any hot races or even the night before a hard training session.
Yeah, very, very helpful.
So we're going to dive into the next topic, which is on specifically training and performance. So one thing that I found very interesting, going back to the fluctuations in hormones during the menstrual cycle, that there's a 2-week span that, quote unquote, men or women are most like men. I remember
it's not my favorite phraseology, but yes, yeah.
I thought that was interesting, but I also wanted to go back to what we had talked about earlier with strength training for female athletes. So there's different kinds of strength training, right? It's either low load, high repetition, or high load, low repetition. Would you be able to expand upon which one women would more benefit from?
I am very deep into this menopausal space right now, as you might have heard, because I've just helped her write the second book and do this podcast. For that population specifically, so as I mentioned, estrogen is anabolic. Estrogen also helps with contractile strength. There's a lot to it. As it goes, you lose your satellite cells, like your muscle stem cells that help you maintain and make muscle. And it's just nothing stimulates those quite as well as lifting heavy. Heavy strength training is really the best way to stimulate those. There's some good research showing that. Especially for a 40 plus population, I would go with like 5 times 5 reps to really stimulate that, because they just don't have those hormones that were doing that job. So you kind of have to pick up that piece. And you will not get bulky. It makes you really strong. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of women are afraid of that they're going to get bulky if they lift heavy.
Yeah, but it's funny that they say that, because if you do a lot of that moderate lifting, honestly, like the 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps, that's a lot of hypertrophy lifting, that it doesn't give you that same stimulation of strength, but it does give it's like we got trapped in this cosmopolitan sort of kind of, you know what I mean? Like a conversation that hasn't left. So.
Yeah. Same thing as the diet mentality, for sure.
Yeah.
It's still out there.
The take-home message is don't rely on Cosmopolitan for any of your athletic training information.
Right.
You learn anything from here.
Unless Selene or Jen are writing an article for it.
Right. I think it's important too when you're talking about strength training, and I totally agree with you, Selene, especially, in our menopause transition is what you said, which I love that phrase. I'm going to steal that from you.
Do it.
But even in the younger, or just from a training perspective and a periodization perspective, you really have to, your strength training has to reflect the cycle you're in your training. So if you're, say, racing for a summer Ironman, you have your strength phase in the winter, and then you're building, and then you're recovering, and then you're going to actually pull back a little bit before you race, because your volume of aerobic training is so high. So you have to take that into account as well. But even as a menopausal athlete, you can still do that and lift heavy and just balance it based on your training schedule.
100%. 100%.
So also, you mentioned aerobic training. What about anaerobic training? Do you recommend more frequent anaerobic training versus like premenopause?
Yeah, I mean, as you get... Oh. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it goes back to that cortisol piece again. Like, staying in that sort of gray zone, that no man's land training zone, is a little more... can be a little more stressful on the body than, like, hitting those high intensities that you kind of lose anyway. You hit those high intensities, and then... it becomes more polarized. Like, we start recommending more polarized kind of training for women after 40 in the menopause transition, because it's just like you don't want to lose that top end. You want to stimulate that top end, and it actually helps sort of like take down the stress, as opposed to sort of always being in that sort of hard situation that is not as productive at that point. So yes, sprint interval training actually is really great.
Yeah, I had read an article, it's probably like close to a year ago or so, but talking about that like black hole of moderate training, where a lot of athletes get stuck in. Like, if you're kind of going... Of
every age.
I don't know. Right. Yes. I don't think that ever changes. But if you're going like 70% every day,
all
you're
the time,
really going to be able to hit...
Just kind of hard.
You're never going to get that 100%.
Right. And there's that 80-20 principle, right? Where 80% of the time it should be easy recovery, aerobic, right? Low heart rate zone, and 20% should be high intensity. And that's where you get your maximum benefits. Unfortunately, most of us kind of sit in between there somewhere, because it's easy. And
because it's fun. It's more fun. Like, you just go sort of hard. Yeah.
Right. I speak from experience.
We all do.
I think we're all probably guilty of that, yes.
So going off recovery, now that we're talking about that, I feel like in training, some people get this idea of like recovery days aren't as important as they truly are. That's where you actually make all the adaptations from your training. Would you be able to expand on that, the importance of those recovery days, just so those people that try to avoid those days off, why should they take them?
Well, that's how training works.
Look how many things we're afraid of. We're afraid of carbs. We're afraid of fat. We're afraid to rest. Like, we're afraid of so many things. There's nothing more important than rest when it comes to athletic performance. You're just not going to get better unless you're taking rest days, and like really effective rest days.
True rest days.
True rest days where you're not doing anything, and maybe you're getting a little massage, or maybe you're taking a nap, you're increasing your nutrients because you're recovering during the day. Your body needs nutrients to recover. You have to respect the recovery, or you're never going to improve the way you can.
Because physically, I mean, that's how training works. You break down and then build back up, but you can't build back up unless you take that time to like literally take off and let your body repair, rejuvenate, restock your stores, muscle proteins, and all that stuff happens. That's when, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows that when they take the true rest day and the stairs disappear and all of a sudden they feel like they're bouncing around, like you've recovered.
Yeah. It's a miracle.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Imagine.
It makes so much sense, and yet we don't do it.
The hardest part is recovering. But that actually brings us into our fourth topic, which is recovery. So I'm going to let Andrea take the lead here with some more questions.
Yeah, you guys are providing perfect segues into our topics. Thank you. So, we've already talked about nutrition during exercise, but recovery nutrition after exercise is just as important, if not more important. So can you both talk a little bit about what people mean when they talk about a recovery window and what female athletes should be doing during that recovery window?
Yeah, for sure. So I always say, like, you're either preparing for a workout or recovering from a workout, because your recovery is also setting you up for success for your next workout. So you really have to, it's like a cycle kind of. So it's the same really principle as properly fueling your body going into a workout. Your body, so we work out really hard. Say we're doing an interval workout. You break down muscle mass. You've depleted your carbohydrate stores. So you actually need to replenish all of that. So you need protein, carbohydrates, and fat. You need protein because your muscle cells need to repair. You need carbohydrate because, like I said, you've depleted all your glycogen stores, glucose and glycogen stores. And then you need good sources of fat, hopefully omega-3 fats or healthy fats, because that's going to help naturally decrease inflammation that you've caused during that workout. The recovery window is interesting, and I'll be interested to see what Selene thinks about this, because there's mixed research out there. We've heard, take something in within 15 minutes, and then we've heard, you got an hour or so. I think the biggest take home here is just to plan a recovery mini meal afterwards. Just make sure it's on your schedule. Make sure you bring something with you if you're not going straight home, so that you have it. I don't know that the timing of it really matters as much as we used to think it does. It did. But what I do know is after you work out, you still have an increased blood flow supply to your muscles, right? So if we're going to eat something, when that blood flow is still increased, then the nutrients are going to get delivered to your muscles more efficiently than they would if you waited 3 hours. That's really the take home there. The timing really, there's a window for it. And now the research is showing from 15 to 60 minutes. So that's a big window, right? But I think I tell my athletes, like, if you're feeling a little bit hungry, start eating something. It's your body sending you a signal that you need something. If you're not really hungry until 30 minutes after your workout, that's okay. I don't want to force feed you, but just know that you still have to take something in and count that as one of your meals for the day.
Yeah, I would echo that.
Thank you.
I think, when we talk to people, it's like, it also depends when you're talking to triathletes, often they're doing 2-a-days, and I think it becomes a little more important when you have that. And Stacy, has sort of erred on to like trying to get, and most importantly, getting some of that protein in right away. Like she hammers that a little bit more, especially again, going into that menopausal space, but even like in that back half of your menstrual cycle when progesterone might be higher, you're just more catabolic, and you want to shut down that process as quickly as you can. Like, so even if you just get a little protein in, like I sometimes just even have a hard-boiled egg. Like I have a bunch of hard-boiled eggs in my fridge, and that is something I can just pop in and just like start some of that process as opposed to like not having anything. But again, I don't think that you need to like you said, to get really insane about it, but having some protein quickly really does help with your muscle protein synthesis. And I can tell you, like, I really, at this point now, I'm 53, I definitely notice it. Like, if I'm good and I like have a hard workout and I get that protein drink in me quickly, I do feel like I feel better.
Yeah. And it decreases the amount of soreness you feel later on too.
Totally. Yeah.
And that you can feel. The soreness, the achiness, you can feel that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always find I use Ultragen right after I work out, and that it takes away the room for error of, okay, I finished my workout, now I don't really feel like eating food, so now it might be an hour before I feel like having food, but I really should have taken something in. So you just pound that drink right when you're done. And then that buys you time to actually feel like you're ready to eat real food.
And it keeps me from getting into that I need another arm to eat more food phase. Do you know what I mean? Like that you like once the appetite does come back, you're like, I wish I could just shovel more. Like it cuts that off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's funny that you said that, because you're right. When you exercise and you're burning all your glucose, right, and you're left with low blood sugar. So at the end of your workout, that's another issue. Besides just recovery, if your blood sugar is really low and you wait too long to eat a recovery snack, it's going to dip lower. And then you're so far behind the 8 ball that you can never catch up. And that's why you're so hungry. And you just can't. You're like a bottomless pit. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that's another feeling you want to avoid. But I like the fact that you are taking in your recovery fuel as liquid. That's another good point to hammer home, because you're also taking care of hydration. So post-exercise hydration, which is another topic when we talk about recovery. I know we talked about food, but hydration is really key too. So that's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So I actually like that strategy. It's good.
One more question about what to take after exercise. Again, there's so many products, right? And some of them advertise that they have antioxidants that will help reduce, soreness and inflammation. But we know that those actually blunt the effects of our workout. So can you guys talk about why we really want to avoid antioxidants in the few hours after working out?
Selene, I'll let you take this, because you look very excited.
It's interesting, because I was in a meeting at Power Bar when they decided to take them out of their products, because the research was showing that imagine this, that your body has a process that you don't want to interfere with, and the inflammatory process is part of you make your own antioxidants. It's a whole system. Your body is doing a lot of things. And if you start putting those in there, you short circuit that natural process, and you actually blunt some of those gains. I mean, I literally was in that board meeting where they were like, yeah, we've removed the vitamin E and the vitamin C, all the stuff that they had in their products, thinking they were doing athletes a favor.
Yeah. Such a good point. I mean, yes, we need antioxidants, and that's where it comes back to food first. So you're probably getting some antioxidants in your recovery meal, which will help a heck of a lot better than any synthetic antioxidants that you get in a bar or pill or powder. So that's key. And it comes back to the Advil thing. Now we're shying away from the massive amounts. Look at how much Advil.
Oh my God, vitamin I
in our world 20 years ago. We used to pop it, during marathons. And now, now we have a better understanding of your body is pretty awesome at doing what it needs to do. So let's just let it do that and stop interfering with the processes.
100%. Yeah. That's so much ibuprofen people were taking.
So much.
I raced with a guy that crushed it in his bottles. I was like, what are you doing?
Ew.
Drinking crushed. I'm like, oh my God. It was horrible. It was horrible.
Now we know. We know that Advil and Aleve actually increase our gut permeability. So the actual worst time to take it is before exercise.
Or during.
That's a recipe for,
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a lot of, I'm speaking from personal experience, a lot of dumb things when we were younger.
A lot of dumb things. I could just baggies of Advil taped to your bike during Ironman. Oh boy.
So along the topic of recovery, we touched a little bit on massage, and of course we know that there are so many benefits to massage, and massage can help us recover from hard efforts or long training weeks. But one topic I wanted to talk about, since we're specifically talking about women's training and nutrition, is cold immersion. So there have been articles right and left, it seems like, lately about how cold immersion does not work. So no one needs to do ice baths anymore. But I've also read that that's not necessarily the case for women because we have a different blood flow response immediately after exercise than men do. So, Selene, would you like to touch on that? Is cold immersion a good thing for women to do?
I was just writing about this for Dr. Stacy Sims, as a matter of fact.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, and actually, not as like the ice bath thing, like cool water is better because women actually start shivering at a higher temperature. But yes, we don't shunt our blood away from the skin and back into central circulation as quickly that some of the studies are finding. So it can be helpful for women to get that blood flow back into their central circulation to do a cool. But you don't have to by any means like jump into an ice bath. Yeah, the studies on ice baths and recovery are kind of equivocal. I don't know if you've seen other things, Jen, for that. I mean, there's benefits maybe for other things like endorphins. Like there's a lot of interesting research on cold shock and heat shock proteins. But like when you're just talking like I ran a marathon, like it feels good on your legs and getting some of that back into central circulation. But you don't have to torture yourself with getting into a bath of ice. That would be my take home. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I am so torn over this topic, and I've taken a deep dive into this like in the last couple months because I've read everything from like the rest ice compression elevation. The man who actually came up with that back in, I don't know, the 40s or whatever it was, said he's sorry, he's wrong. He's wrong.
Yeah, I've read that.
You know, and then I'm like, okay, so this is what kind of started my whole path.
Wow.
But then I've actually I talked to an orthopedic surgeon who's written papers on ice, and he says, no, ice is good. It actually helps decrease inflammation. And then you have scientists that are saying, no, kind of like what we're saying about the Advil, let your body do what it needs to do and don't interfere with that process. So I am so torn because the research seems to be, you know, just total opposite ends of
it
the
is
spectrum.
A lot. It is, yeah.
Although
it is a lot
the
over
research
that.
on mental, the research
like
on
Wim
mental
Hof.
Toughness and ice bath actually is fascinating because from a mental toughness standpoint, I think it's actually really
like
beneficial.
the Wim Hof method. Like get in.
Now you're getting into Wim Hof.
The whole thing. But I do think like I mean when I'm faced with something like that, I'm like intuitively what am I like? It feels good to submerge in cool water, right? It doesn't feel good to kill yourself, but like after a nice hard mountain bike race, man, putting my legs in a little bit of cool water just feels amazing. So that's so then I go with that, right? Like if it is feeling like that is
your body.
Right, totally. Like that. This is, but when you're talking about rice and stuff, I've always thought that too. Like sometimes it feels like you want to like get some of that inflammation down, but sometimes that ice is counterproductive. You want more mobility, and then you want some heat. But I think if you tune in, that you can figure that out for yourself.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. I think the jury's still out on that whole thing from a research perspective. So it's fascinating.
It probably just depends.
Right, maybe. But you know, to that point, like sitting in a hot bath feels really good after a long bike ride too. So then what do we do?
Go back and forth.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to do another podcast episode on that when we get more research.
Yes.
We'll go to a spa and try it out.
Okay.
That's a great idea. We can experiment with all of the the recovery methods. So, you know, I think when we as athletes talk about recovery, one thing that we don't talk about a lot, and it's so important, is sleep. So for women, and depending where you're at in, you know, premenopausal, in the transition, or post, there are different ways to promote better sleep habits. But what would you, Selene, since you're with your podcast and all of the writing that you've been doing on this topic, what would you recommend for women to help improve their sleep quality?
You know, one of the biggest things is that kind of surprised me, but I've talked to many people and had a couple experts on the show. It's that cortisol piece again. I mean, women have sleep disruptions during the transition because of a lot of things. I mean, if you're having hot flashes and night sweats and that's super disruptive, then you should really pursue, whether it be a hormone therapy or something, to get that under control, because it is super disruptive, but if it's, a lot of it is anxiety, that rising anxiety piece, and mindfulness, and taking moments during the day to do mindfulness and to do breathing and to get yourself settled down throughout the day actually helps your evening settling down, because you've trained your body like that it can come down, sort of like you train anything, right? And for a lot of women, the first time that they let their mind settle down is when their head hits the pillow. And it's not doing that. It's like, hey, we got stuff to talk about, and then it's again at 2 a.m, like we've got stuff to work through. So it's like working on that piece is really important. And then, there are some things, Stacey's a huge fan of the tart cherry juice, or anything that sort of can manipulate that melatonin, because that does become more difficult too with age and with the transition. But the stress piece is huge. It's a really big thing, and it's underappreciated. Like taking those moments to calm your mind and to teach your mind how to calm. That's trainable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, this is kind of a aside, but we don't think about life stress the same way we think about our training, but we really should.
We should.
Unless we're professional athletes. And even if you are, you don't live in a cave. You still interact with other people and have other stressors. So if you're an athlete who is training for a marathon, but at the same time you moved or you changed jobs or work is really stressful or your kids are, being schooled from home because of a pandemic, all of that stress adds into the miles you're running or the miles you're biking. And we should take that into account when planning our training load. I don't think enough coaches do that, and I definitely think athletes don't, kind of give themselves, not credit, but like give themselves a break for when they're going through a stressful time in their life. Maybe now isn't the time to try to up your mileage or to, train for an Ironman. Wait until life calms down a little bit before you add in a major stressor like that. But going back to sleep, Jen, Selene mentioned tart cherry juice. Is there anything like that you recommend to your clients to help improve sleep quality?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to eating enough. So sometimes some athletes are so hungry in the middle of the night that's waking them up, and it's because of low energy availability. Yeah. So if we're eating consistently throughout the whole day and regulating your blood sugar throughout the whole day, you can actually set yourself up for a deeper sleep. And we know that when we sleep is when growth hormone is released, and then that's doing all the recovery, repair work in our body. So we need to get into that deep sleep. So again, balancing your meals throughout the day and avoiding that I'm going to eat like a bird or I'm going to go into my workout fasted, right? Then eat like a bird afterwards because I'm in a rush or I'm not hungry, and then have like 3 dinners because we're so hungry and then go to bed. Yeah. That's our GI.
That's not good either.
No, your GI system's all slow, and then you're never going to get into that deep sleep as if you would if you really fueled your day, your busiest part of your day, really, really well. And then have a little, this is the other thing women are scared of. They're scared of like eating after 6 or eating after 7. Like there should be no time rules. Yes. It's what your body needs when it needs it, and move on with your day. So a lot of times I'll recommend maybe having a yogurt before bed, little calcium boost before bed, or another higher protein snack. Even if it's like, maybe rice and beans or half a chicken sandwich that's left over from earlier in the day or whatever, just something to kind of calm your system down, to boost serotonin in your brain, and then you can have a deeper sleep. And again, just eating enough, because I think so much of our sleep disturbances are we just didn't fuel ourselves properly during the day.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. One question about eating before bed. Megan and I were talking about this, that something that's really helped both of us in the past few years is having our night protein. So what's the benefit of that? Like, I know why, but please tell our listeners why people might want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So again, growth hormone is going to be at the highest level of efficiency when we're sleeping, right? That's when it gets, that's when it goes to work. So one of the major jobs of growth hormone is repairing muscle cells, so your amino acids. So if you're going to have a high protein snack before bed, it's actually going to go in, pass through your GI tract, absorb through your small intestines, into your bloodstream, break down into amino acids, and then it's going to be pulled into your muscles to help that repair. You want that like power couple of growth hormone and amino acids overnight in that deep sleep, and then you're going to wake up feeling like $1 million. That's really the purpose of it.
I am forever awesome. Now going to think about the power couple of protein and growth hormone going down the aisle as I go to bed.
As you sleep.
Yes. Thank you, Jen.
You can tell I work with youth athletes. I keep it very simple.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for all of your very insightful comments on many, many topics. I think Megan has one more question for both of you to kind of wrap up our podcast.
One final question. What is the most common mistake that you see from female athletes?
Not eating enough. I mean, that's just plain and straight up. Just not fueling themselves. It's across the board, every phase of life.
Yeah. I'm going to be so boring and totally agree with her, because it is 99% of the time an issue for athletes.
Yeah.
Just not eating enough and being afraid and maybe not knowing. This is another one, so I'll change my answer. So not eating enough and not knowing what to eat. So I think a lot of females just don't know what to eat, so they eat the same thing they've always been taught to eat, like a salad, or a rice cake. That drives me nuts. And just like diet foods, and not really knowing, okay, I need protein. What is protein? I need carbs. What are the best carbs? I need fats. What are the healthiest form? A lot of athletes come to me and say, I just don't know what to eat.
Yeah.
Therefore, they're not eating enough.
That's a great take-home message. If you think you're eating enough, chances are you're probably not. Maybe reach out to a dietitian, nutritionist, at least get an evaluation, see what you can be adding, what you're missing.
For sure.
We went over a lot of very helpful information for all of female athletes out there. Jen, Selene, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome. Hey. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too
I know. No, that happened.
Sorry, guys.
Your evil twin.
I froze, so I logged in. Is there still two of me?
No, there's just one.
No. You wrapped it up. Thanks, Megan.
Yes.
Siri went up.
You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
You guys are awesome. That was a great
thank you.
Conversation. So fun.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, but hopefully Riverside will fix it.
Yeah, sorry for my technical difficulties at the beginning, too.
Yeah, it happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's life.
So this episode is going to air next Saturday, the 6th.
Oh.
Right? Wednesday. This Wednesday? Oh, awesome. Okay.
You guys do a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's awesome.
Sweet.
We are very lucky to have BJ helping us with our podcast.
Awesome.
So we'll tag your professional